My girlfriend said, "His family is so simple, I would be mortified to introduce them to my friends." I replied, "That's a shame." I waited until her company's holiday party at the country club. Then I introduced my father to her CEO. They were old college roommates. When my father offered him a job, Nolan, 35, male, had been with Bianca, 33, for 4 years. Our life in Philadelphia was a meticulously curated performance of her social ambitions. We lived in a stunning, minimalist condo overlooking Rittenhouse Square, a space filled with art she had selected and furniture I had paid for. I was an architectural historian, a quiet academic with a consulting practice that brought in a respectable $110,000 a year. Bianca was a rising star at a prestigious wealth management firm, earning $150,000 plus a significant bonus. Our social life was a calendar of her firm's events, charity galas, and dinners at places like Laurel, where my primary role was to nod and look impressed. Hey viewers, we are aiming for 1,000 subscribers. Your support brings us closer. Subscribe and be part of the journey. The opportunity that would ultimately unravel our life together arrived via a formal letter with an Italian postmark. An old professor of mine, now the director of a major cultural heritage foundation, was offering me a 2-year fellowship in Florence. The position was to lead the historical documentation and preservation plan for a 15th-century Medici villa. The stipend was modest, only $90,000 a year, but the professional prestige was immeasurable. It was the kind of project that defined a career in my field. I told Bianca about it that evening, my voice filled with a passion I rarely expressed. I described the villa, the historical significance, the chance to live and work in the cradle of the Renaissance. She listened with a detached air, scrolling through her phone. "Florence?" she asked, her nose wrinkling slightly. "It's so crowded with tourists. And the pay is a step backward, Nolan." She shook her head. "My career is here. I'm on the verge of making partner. You can't expect me to put that on hold for your little Italian sabbatical." A few days later, after a brief, strained visit from my parents, she delivered the final verdict on my world. "Your family is so simple," she said to her friend on the phone, assuming I couldn't hear. I would be mortified to introduce them to my friends. Update 1. I quietly accepted the Florence Fellowship the next morning. Bianca's comment was not a wound, it was a key, unlocking a door I hadn't realized was closed. My family, who lived a quiet, unassuming life in rural Vermont, were the kindest, most intelligent people I knew. Her shame was a reflection of her own values, not theirs. She continued her campaign of quiet condescension. At a dinner party, she introduced me to a new client. "This is Nolan," she said with a tight smile. "He's an academic. He's thinking of taking a little break to go play in some old buildings in Italy." Her friends offered their pity. "You have to be practical, Nolan," one of them said. "Bianca has a real career to think about." I offered no defense. I had already begun my preparations. I opened a new bank account with a European affiliate. I started an intensive online Italian language course. I spent my evenings researching apartments in the Altrarno district of Florence, a neighborhood known for its artisan workshops and quiet charm. I also had a long conversation with my father. I explained the situation with Bianca. He listened patiently. "Son," he said, his voice calm and steady, "a person's character is revealed not by who they embrace, but by who they discard." Update 2. I chose a Sunday morning to make my decision final. The sunlight streamed into our pristine, white condo. "Bianca, I've accepted the fellowship," I stated. "I'm moving to Florence in 2 months." Her face, which had been relaxed as she read the style section of the paper, hardened. "You actually went through with it. After I told you it was a career dead end." "I did," I confirmed. "This is the most important project of my life." "Your project," she scoffed. "And what about my life? What about the network I've built, the status you have?" I corrected, my voice even. "I am not a part of your portfolio." She stood up, her eyes blazing. "Then you can go have your dusty, low-rent fantasy alone. You choose that, or you choose me. You don't get both." I thought of my simple family, of her mortification. The choice was clear. "I choose my work," I answered. Update 3. The weeks that followed were a cold war fought in our minimalist apartment. Bianca alternated between fits of rage and a dismissive certainty that I would eventually come to my senses. She told her parents I was having an intellectual crisis. I remained detached, focusing on the complex logistics of my move. I sold my Audi S5, arranged for the shipment of my extensive personal library, and began the process of separating our shared possessions. Her friends, once my friends, now looked through me. On the day the movers came for my books and my desk, Bianca was out for a long brunch with them, a final, calculated act of indifference. I flew to Florence on a crisp October morning. The city was a living museum, every stone saturated with history. My new apartment was a quiet sanctuary with a small terrace overlooking a hidden courtyard. The Medici villa was more magnificent than I had imagined, a place of silent, breathtaking beauty. I was finally where I belonged, immersed in the substance of history, far from the superficiality of my old life. Update 4. 6 months in Florence was a renaissance of my own. My Italian was becoming fluent. I spent my weekends exploring the Tuscan countryside. My work at the villa was deeply fulfilling. I discovered a series of previously unknown architectural drawings hidden in the villa's archives, a major historical find. My foundation, pleased with the discovery, awarded my project an additional research grant of €50,000. I used some of it to travel, to see the great architectural works of Europe. One afternoon, I received a text from one of Bianca's old friends. "Hey Nolan, we've seen your pictures from Florence. Looks amazing. Bianca said you were struggling to adjust." I thought of her comment, the one that had started it all. His family is so simple. I realized then that she saw everything, and everyone, as a reflection of her own status. My family's quiet life, my academic passion, it all failed to reflect the image she wanted to project. I replied politely. "Life here is wonderful. I hope you are well." Update 5. My discovery at the villa was significant enough to be reported in several international art and history journals. An article in Architectural Digest profiled the project, with my name and title, "Lead Preservationist," featured prominently. The news rippled back to Philadelphia. Bianca's emails started that night. "Lead Preservationist. You told me it was just a student fellowship," one accused. "You deliberately missold me about the importance of this work," another claimed. Then came the calls from her friends, their voices now filled with a new, fawning respect. My own family, who had known the project's true importance all along, were simply happy for me. The public, verifiable truth of my success was beginning to dismantle her carefully constructed narrative of my failure. Update 6. She called me a week later. She was planning to visit Italy with friends, and suggested she could stop in Florence. I knew it was a reconnaissance mission. I agreed. She arrived looking as polished as ever, but there was a new, calculating look in her eyes. She toured the villa with me, her comments now filled with praise. "This is incredible, Nolan," she said. "I had no idea." That evening, over dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Arno, she made her move. "I was wrong," she said. "I was afraid of the change. I see now that this is your world, and it's amazing. I could move here. I could consult for an Italian firm. We could have this life together." I looked at her, at the woman who had been mortified by my simple family. "You don't want this life, Bianca," I said. "You just want the prestige you now think it offers." "That's not true," she insisted. "Isn't it?" I replied calmly. I told her I would be back in Philadelphia for the holidays, and that I would attend her company's annual party as her guest. I told her we could talk more then. It was a lie. The stage was being set. Update 7. The annual holiday party for Bianca's firm was the social event of the season, held at a grand old country club in the Philadelphia suburbs. I flew in from Florence. I brought my father with me. He was, as always, dressed in a simple, well-made but unassuming suit. Bianca was visibly horrified when I introduced them in the lobby. She tried to steer me away, but I was insistent. We walked into the grand ballroom. I spotted her CEO, a man named Richard Abernathy, holding court near the fireplace. I walked my father over to him. Bianca trailed behind us, her face a mask of controlled panic. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, "I'd like you to meet my father, Robert Miller." Abernathy turned, a polite, corporate smile on his face. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned recognition. "Bob?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "Bob Miller. I haven't seen you in 35 years. They embraced like long, lost brothers. "Not since our dorm room at Princeton," my father said, clapping him on the back. Bianca's face went completely white. They talked for a few minutes, catching up on old times. Then, my father's tone shifted. You know, Richard, he said, our foundation is looking for a new director for our North American philanthropic efforts. It's a challenging role, but it's meaningful work. The compensation is about double what you're making here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. You should think about it. Give me a call. He handed the card to Abernathy. Bianca's entire team had gathered around, drawn by the scene. Abernathy read the card out loud, his voice filled with awe. Robert Miller, Chairman. The Miller Foundation. The foundation was one of the largest and most respected philanthropic organizations in the world, with an endowment in the tens of billions. My simple father was one of the most powerful men in the country. He just chose to live without the fanfare. The silence around us was absolute. Every eye turned from the CEO to my father and then, with a slow, dawning horror, to Bianca. Her entire world, built on a fragile scaffolding of perceived status, had just been publicly, spectacularly, demolished. Update 8, a year later, I was finishing my fellowship in Florence. The villa was secure, its history preserved for generations. I was in a new, wonderful relationship with an Italian art historian named Sofia. Our life together was built on a shared passion for the real, the authentic, the things that last. Richard Abernathy had taken my father's offer. His departure had thrown Bianca's firm into chaos, and she had been passed over for the partnership she craved. She had eventually left the firm. She sent me a final, brief email. I valued the wrong things. She wrote. I am sorry. I replied with a short, polite message. I wish you peace. I archived the email. Update 9, several months later, I was in New York with my father, attending a benefit for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. My foundation was a major sponsor. We ran into Bianca's old boss, the new CEO of her former firm. He shook my hand warmly. No, Len, he said. Your father stole the best CEO I ever worked with. But I can't say I blame him. He looked at me with a wry smile. Bianca never understood the difference between wealth and value. She was so busy chasing the symbols that she missed the substance entirely. He shook his head. I'm sorry you had to be a part of that. His words brought a final, quiet sense of resolution. I reflected on the lesson of the past few years. Bianca's greatest fear, the thing she would have been mortified by, was having her world see that she was connected to a simple family. The ultimate irony was that my family's simplicity was a choice, a quiet strength that was more powerful than any of the superficial status she so desperately craved. She had been mortified by a fantasy, and in the end, she was the one who was publicly humiliated by the quiet, undeniable truth of who we really were.